Okay? Okay. First of all, welcome. It's lovely to see you all here on it's a very cold Friday afternoon, and I hope that it's a really useful session for you. I just wanted to introduce myself first. I'm Danielle McConville, as Radine mentioned. I'm your examiner. Slightly unusually in the context of other institutes, I'm your examiner and I also mark your papers. And I actually tend to think that that's a really useful thing for you guys, because it means that there's no sort of divorce between the people who are writing your exam paper and the people who are marking it. And that's really useful for me to see how you're interpreting things like the syllabus, how you guys are getting on. And it gives me a lot of freedom to be able to give credit where credit's due. And I think that's really particularly important in a subject like information systems. The other thing to say about me that I think is quite important for you to know is that I'm an accountant by background. Okay, so I actually trained with Ernst & Young in Belfast. These days I'm a lecturer in Queen's in Belfast, and I teach information systems, I teach management accounting and things like that. And the reason why I think that's important is because I think sometimes when you look at this particular syllabus and you look at this subject, there's a risk that you think that this is something that's about IT and it's about technologies. And if you leave with nothing else today, I really would like to sort of dissuade you from that notion, and probably to talk a wee bit more about what we want to get from you when we talk about this particular module and in this particular exam. Because look, at the end of the day, we are not training IT professionals here. What we want to make sure is that we have got accountants who have a good grip of a range of these issues, not that we have somebody who can go out and implement this tomorrow. Okay, that's not what we're at. Just with that in mind, it would be brilliant for me to get a better sense of who you guys are, if you don't mind. Can I get a wee sense of how many of you are working in practice at the moment? Okay, so a few people, probably about 5 or 6 people in the room working in practice. Are the rest of you then working in organisations? Okay, yeah, so we've got about 26 people in the room, we've got maybe 20 odd people in the room. So most people in the room are actually working within organisations. Is there anybody in the room who has any sort of responsibility for IT or information systems in their current role? Okay, absolutely nobody. Okay, that's a great thing. Okay, and part of the reason why I think that's really interesting to know is I think sometimes you feel like, I'm working in an organisation, I'm on the back foot here, or I'm working in practice, I'm on the back foot. You're absolutely not. Everybody's in the same boat here. No, there are no IT specialists in this room. Some people will at some stage or another have maybe worked on a particular project or been part of a particular team, but we're not assuming that you have that sort of knowledge, and I think that's really important. Okay, so this session's been funded by SkillsNet, so we have to say thank you very much to them for the funding that has enabled us all to be here today. What I want to do with you in this session, I want to give a wee bit of guidance about preparing for the exam. In particular, I want to look at something that is unique to F2 information systems, which is this idea of the syllabus and the core or important topics. Because I think that's really crucial for you to hear that, and also to ask me any questions that you have about that at this point, which is sort of 6 months out from the exam. I've been asked to cover some specific aspects of content as well, and I'm deliberately covering, the first one is about a particular technology. We're going to be looking at enterprise applications and systems, and the second one is deliberately not about a technology. It's about the broader role of information systems in the competitive business environment, okay? Because I think sometimes students do trip up over that when they're thinking about, oh, this must be about technologies, it must be about cloud, it must be about CRM and so on. We're going to talk a wee bit about exam techniques, so I'm going to give you a wee bit of sort of general guidance related to this exam. We'll do that very quickly. But probably more importantly, I want to talk to you about completing case study questions, and we're going to use the April 17 paper. Now, in front of you, you have a couple of things. You should have the August 17 paper in front of you. The April 17 paper actually just came down, so I'll pass that out to you when you need that. You also have the slides for today. As Radine mentioned, this is also going to go back online. So if there's anything that you're sort of struggling to get down, I will try not to talk as quickly as is my natural tendency. Apologies for that. So if there is anything that you struggle to get down, first of all, give me a wee wave and say, Danielle, what were you saying there? Or if you don't, just you can have a look at it again. So, but you've got the notes pages there as well. The other thing that you have there is the educator's briefing, and I'm going to come back to that. Okay, we will get a wee coffee break in this session. We're due to finish at 4 o'clock. I will not keep you beyond that. It is a Friday afternoon. For those of you watching online, well, you're very lucky about that. But for the rest of us, it's Friday afternoon. I won't keep you beyond the 4 o'clock. We'll get a little coffee break just after 3, and etc. as well. I would say to you as well, please, if there's anything at all at any stage, give me a wee wave, ask me a question if it's just to clarify or anything else. If I can answer it for you there and then, I will, and if not, I'll make a wee note and we'll come back to it later on if it needs a wee bit more detail or anything like that. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about preparation, okay? It's funny, in these sessions, people are always really keen to hear about things that relate to exam technique. My argument is exam technique is really, really important, but ultimately, if you haven't done the preparation a couple of months out, if you don't know the content, exam technique's not going to get you very far. There's nothing worse than staring at a paper, okay? Well, we've all been there, okay? There's nothing worse than staring at a paper and looking at a question and going, oh, mind blank, okay? So the preparation really is key. And the preparation particularly is key for a subject like this, which is, I'll be honest, it's alien to most of us, okay? It's not what we thought we were going to be doing when we decided to do accounting exams. We thought we'd be doing variance analysis. We thought we might get to do P&Ls. What do they call them these days? Statement of profit. Anyway, you can tell I don't teach financial accounting. But this is not what naturally we thought we would be doing, okay? So we need to think about our approach to it, and we need to do some careful preparation, particularly because these are not things that any of us are seeing day in, day out. So, yeah, go ahead.
Is there any more of the slides? We don't have the slides here in the last.
Thank you very much for that. I do have, there's a couple of packs sitting spare. Yep. Can I take this pack as well? There's another pack there. Has anybody else not got the slides? Sorry, another one. We got a, is there anything in there? Not that one. Anybody got a slide? Can I take those? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
No trouble. Thank you. Has everybody got? Okay. Apologies to those viewing online. Okay, so from the syllabus then, what are we trying to do? The aim of this subject is about enabling you to develop an understanding of the role and application of information systems, IS, and information technology in the management and control of organisations. It's about developing your understanding of selecting and advising on the implementation of appropriate systems, processes, controls, and solutions in a business environment. Okay? As I said, as I mentioned early on, this is not about training you to do the work of IT professionals. It's about making sure that you understand what these are, that you can advise, that you can select, and talk about the implementation of these systems. It's about equipping you for a range of different roles, okay? Obviously, a lot of you are in different roles at the moment. Some of you are working in firms. Some of you will be auditors. Some of you will be advisors to business. Some of you are working in organisations, maybe as management accountants, maybe in a finance department. Some of you maybe already are in sort of financial controller roles and things like that. And importantly, we need to think about information systems actually in all of those roles. So whether we're thinking about this as an auditor who's looking at the systems within a business that they're auditing, maybe someone who's advising businesses that are coming together and maybe have different information systems, and what are the risks associated with that, what are the challenges associated, what are the opportunities there. But also if we're thinking about things in terms of the organisation that we work in and that we're trying to make improvements to, that maybe we're dealing with things that our competitors already have and maybe we're behind the curve and we're looking at how we need to develop as a business. Okay, so there are lots of reasons why we need to look at this, and this is very much the perspective that we have. In terms of what that translates into, in terms of what you need to know for getting through this exam, which, let's face it, is at this stage feels like the most important thing, well, the syllabus content is very much your checklist of what you need to know. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't say much more than that. That syllabus is there. Anything on that syllabus is examinable. Okay, and it's a large syllabus. Okay. What has been done uniquely in this paper to try and help both you and to help the educators as well, to try and direct your knowledge, is that has been split into what are called core and important areas. For those of you in the room, have you seen this educators briefing yet? No? Okay, I think it still wasn't online when I looked earlier on in the week, okay? The educators briefing is available, it's called the educators briefing, but it's available to all of you as well. It's available for all of your modules. But what's particularly unusual about F2 information systems is the bit at the end, okay? So section 5 at the end in the education focus. If those of you are in the room, if you want to flick to that. For those of you who are watching online, the educators briefing for 2017-18 should be available online by the time you're watching this. Now, that education focus, what it does is it highlights a number of areas that are considered to be core and that are considered to be important. So there are 4 items that are considered to be core, and a further 8 items that are considered to be important. Okay, so I'll let you read through those in your own time. what is very important for you to understand about this today is that those core and important areas are tied to specific areas of the paper. Okay, so your section A includes a compulsory case study. That compulsory case study should be primarily related to the core materials, but can take some from important and other areas of the syllabus. Okay. Similarly, in section B, you have a choice of 3 questions from 4 worth 20 marks each. And the rubric that's given, again, it's all in the educator's briefing, is that approximately 1/3 of the marks come from the important areas and the remainder should come from the core areas. Okay? So if you think about it and you work that out, there is an awful lot of your exam that is going to relate to those core areas, plus some bits that are selected from the important area as well. Okay? That's, as I say, that's entirely unique to information systems. It should guide your preparation, okay? I would also say to you, those core and important areas, I took over as examiner for the 2015 papers. Those core and important areas were already in place at that time, and the syllabus was also in place at that time. So in terms of using past paper questions as a basis for your preparation and your revision, those are still entirely relevant for those years, okay? So if you're looking at papers from 15, 16, obviously those are papers that I've written, they will be based on that exact same rubric, okay? So nothing in that has changed over those couple of years, okay? So please feel free to use those questions. The core and important for me as an examiner is a pain in the neck, okay? Because it really ties me in terms of what I can ask you. Okay, I will not want to write a question, whether it's in section A or section B, that falls outside what I have clearly said in the educator's briefing I want to do. Okay, for you that's a really good thing. Okay, because it does mean that there's a very clear sense here of what is examinable regularly, and because you have the past paper questions from me, you also have a really good sense of how I ask these things as well. Okay, so that's really important. The other thing that I would mention to you as well is the importance of the Loudon and Loudon textbook. Now, I know that the Loudon and Loudon textbook, has anybody engaged with that textbook as yet? Yeah, 1 or 2, but most probably not yet at this stage. Okay, if you haven't engaged with it yet, it's a typical information systems text. It's actually very good of its type. The information systems text can be a bit vague sometimes. It's very good of its type. It has lots of case studies, etc. But it's a fairly large textbook. What I would say to you in relation to that textbook is, look, I don't see, because I don't teach you and then write the exam. I don't have any engagement with the education side of things. I don't see your e-learnings, etc. Okay. What I know that you have is that Loudon textbook. So in terms of things like terminology and things like that, I will be going by the Loudon and Loudon textbook. Okay, I'm conscious that sometimes especially if you've had any previous experience with information systems or IT, sometimes you may have slightly differing definitions, and sometimes definitions can feel a wee bit vague. I will always work by that Loudon and Loudon text for you. Okay, so you shouldn't see something, for example, in a question that phrases something in a different way to the Loudon and Loudon textbook. Okay, so just be aware of that. The Loudon and Loudon textbook, a lot, in terms of how much of that is examinable, be guided by the core and important. Okay, be guided by the core and important. Not that you need to know every bit of every page of the 300 very detailed pages in Loudon and Loudon. Okay, folks, does anybody have any questions about any of that at this stage? Sure. Okay, if you do have any questions later on, you can of course ask me in the break. I won't answer to you one-on-one. I'll answer to the whole class or the whole group whenever we come back. Okay, so let's move on then. In terms of what you need to know. So, in terms of what's in the syllabus, what's core and important, you need to have some knowledge about specific technologies. Okay, so some of the things that are listed, you may have just seen if you glance through that section 5. Technologies including things like cloud computing, ERP, CRM, SCM, business intelligence and analytics. And we're going to look at some of those today. We're going to look at a few more. Business intelligence and analytics is going to be in the webinar I'm going to record later on. So there is some need for knowledge about those technologies at a good level of detail, what they are, advantages, disadvantages of them, risks, implications of these for operations and strategy. Okay, that's the sort of level of understanding that you need. And you're going to see that when I pick up on, we're going to look at ERP and CRM in this session. Okay, and you'll see what I mean by an explanation, the advantages, disadvantages, challenges, that sort of thing. Okay, But you also importantly need to know about information systems and how those relate to operation and strategy. Okay, so there's actually quite a bit of this paper that kind of nearly moves away from systems and IT and actually looks more at the strategy of a business and how the information systems can help you to achieve that strategy, or how they can help you to help your business to perform better. Okay, so we're going to look at a little bit of that content as well today. And the last point there is about applying these in real life business situations. Okay, now in honesty, preparing this for an exam, this comes with a bit of practice, okay? We're talking about this not just in the case study questions, okay? So the case study question, you will be given a scenario and asked to apply, you know, you'll get some questions and you'll be asked to apply your knowledge. People expect that in the case study. What you need to also be aware of is for section B questions, which are very short, you know, sort of 1 line, 2 line questions, you don't get the big kind of 1-page document of here's a scenario, but you will usually be asked for some sort of context. Okay, and the reason for that is that as an examiner, I don't want to invite you to just dump everything you know about subject X. I want you to show me that you understand it. And the way that I will quite often ask you to do that is through a context. So just to give you a few examples, the August 17 paper that you actually have in front of you. For those of you who are watching online, again, that paper is available online. The August 17 paper, question 3 on that, talks about ESS, DSS and business intelligence, and don't worry about what those are for now, but for a manufacturer of retail products. Question 4 talks about contemporary hardware and software trends for a department store. And question 5 about CRM in a professional services firm, and hopefully we'll get to look at that today. What I want you to be aware of is, look, when I'm reading these questions, I never expect you to have prior knowledge of those industries or sectors or anything like that. So when I'm marking on the basis of what the man in the street would understand about a department store, a manufacturer, things like that, okay? So don't worry about that when you see a question like that. But what I am encouraging you to do is to think about, well, okay, if I'm talking about the value of this to this type of business, and it's maybe a retailer, I don't want to give examples of things that relate to a manufacturer but not a retailer. Okay, so it's getting you to kind of think about what's what you know and what's relevant to that context. Okay, so that's really what we're trying to do there. And again, we're going to look at some past paper questions. I'm a big fan of learning through past paper questions. I'm kind of hoping you guys are as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a lot of past paper questions. We're just going to kind of talk through them as we go through the rest of this section today. Okay, so any questions on any of that before we go on? Okay, let's have a look at some content then. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about enterprise applications and systems. Okay, now, if I can get you to go to your educator's briefing, and if I can get you to go to section 5, which is page 3 in the education focus. Okay, so for those of you who are online, if you want to have a quick look at this, we are looking at core item 2. Okay, so there are 4 core items. The second one of these says that one of the core items is enterprise applications and systems, in particular information systems used for enterprise resource planning, ERP, supply chain management, SCM, and client customer relationship management, CRM, plus the management challenges to building and using these. Okay, so these are obviously specific technologies. We're looking for specific technical knowledge and the ability to apply this. Okay, it's not about implementing an ERP system. Okay, people get paid an awful lot of money for that. Okay, but it is about knowing in good detail, understanding what these are, and being able to discuss what they mean, broadly speaking, what they mean for a business, why might they be beneficial, what kind of risks and what kind of challenges arise. Now, what I have done is, because as I mentioned to you, Loudon and Loudon is what I know we all have in common. So the material and the terminology and everything that comes here has drawn very, very heavily on Loudon and Loudon. Okay, so just to make sure that you're not getting anything that's confusing. For this section, we're looking particularly at some material from chapter 2 for the basic definitions. And then chapter 9, which is what goes into a wee bit more detail in terms of the implementation, challenges, benefits, and so on. Okay. When we talk, first of all, when we talk about enterprise applications, okay, broadly speaking, we'll talk about ERP systems in a wee bit more detail in a minute. When we talk about enterprise applications, we are talking about applications that relate to the whole enterprise. Okay, that's all that we mean. Okay, so an ERP system, a CRM system, an SCM system will relate to a variety of aspects of the enterprise. So it's not just something that exists within the accounting function or the HR function or the sales function. This is about applications that relate across the whole enterprise. So just in terms, when you see that term, just so that you know what is meant by it. We're looking at ERP systems first of all. Okay, now I've deliberately picked this to have a look at because I think sometimes students find that this, and I know this with students that I would have in Queen's and Belfast as well, I know that sometimes people think that there's more to this than there is. Okay, ERP systems, when you see them in practice, yes, they are very complex things. They are, okay, and the reason they are such complex things is because organisations are so complex. And what ERP systems are really trying to do is to take all those very different aspects of businesses and integrate those business processes together, okay? So you're talking about integrating, mentions manufacturing and production, finance and accounting, sales and marketing, and human resources into a single software system, okay? So the idea here is rather than having completely separate systems in each of those functional areas that don't talk to each other, we look at a system that brings together all of that information in real time so that anything that happens in one of those parts of the system is automatically updated for the others. Okay? And that makes sense because actually that's how organisations work. Okay? We know that, for example, if somebody places a sales order, okay, with somebody in the sales and marketing department, we know that that needs information that comes from the finance department. Okay, is that customer within their credit limit? Okay, we know that it has a knock-on effect, for example, in checking whether the inventory is available. Well, that comes from the manufacturing and production side. So even simple examples like that, you can see the need for this sort of kind of combined information. So the idea is that it collects this data together from many different divisions of the firm. Specifically, there is a range of integrated software modules and then a central database. Okay, so there are different modules and then a central database where people who are working in each of the different functional areas, engaging with the software in different ways, having different views of what's available, having different access to that database, can actually update all of their information into that central database and access the things that are relevant for them to do their job. Okay, so access controls are obviously really important because the people who work in manufacturing and production don't need to access the same information sometimes that people in the finance department need. But it's all there together in a central repository. So if there is anything that they need to use to be able to fulfill their job description, then it's available to them in that database, subject to good quality access controls. And anything that's entered in one process automatically is available for other processes. So for example, that sales order automatically is updated to that customer account. So if somebody is in the finance department and they're looking at that customer account, they can see that they've just placed that order. Maybe the goods haven't been shipped yet, and they can see that that order's pending. Okay. Okay, that's just one of the diagrams from Loudon and Loudon, figure 9.1, and it's just showing this idea of a centralized database. It's showing some examples of the types of information that are coming into that centralized database, being updated and returning to the people within these different functions. So for example, with sales and marketing, it's information like orders, sales forecast, return requests, price changes. For the finance department, information about things like cash on hand, accounts receivable, customer credit, etc. Okay. What's the purpose of all of this? Okay, the idea here is about breaking down internal barriers. Okay, you know yourselves when you want to go, if you want to go and ask somebody in your organisation for information, what's the first question they ask you? Why? Okay, yeah, and sometimes it's a really shirty why. Okay, so the idea is that if people need this information to do their job, it's available to them through the system. Okay, without necessarily having to go and ask for it, or having to have somebody go and generate that information and send it to you, etc. Okay. It should give management a better overview for their decision-making purposes. Okay, so if you're a manager of that organisation and it gives you an overview of a range of different areas of the business, not just if, for example, it doesn't just give you an overview of the finance department, you can see other things in relation to production and manufacturing. There's a lot in here that's about the efficient capturing of data. Okay, and that's because once the information is entered in any one of those processes, it's automatically updated altogether. So let's say, for example, the people in the sales department find out that actually a customer has moved premises. They can update information about that customer on that customer record, and it's updated for any part of the business that needs to see that, for example, the finance function. Okay. it should be, if it's well implemented, it should be scoped to give you better access controls to your data. There's a potential here to improve customer service, okay, because you can get access to information more quickly. When the customer calls, you can see in real time what's the most up-to-date information on that customer account, for example. There's a potential to increase productivity, more about operational efficiency there. Rapid responses to customer requests, and it includes analytical tools as well, usually to evaluate overall organisational performance. Okay, so it would be usual enough that you've got this lovely big centralised database with all this information coming in from all of these different processes, and the ERP will usually include some sort of tools that will help you to analyse the information that's there. Okay, and I'll just park that there for now, and then I'll just flag you up that we're going to talk a wee bit more about business intelligence and analytics, and the sort of information, how that information coming from the organisation, from its transactions, how that's analysed is in the webinar after this session. Okay. Okay, so that's just some of the ways in which ERP systems can add value. Other ways that questions, so how would that come up in a question? It would come up in terms of, okay, what benefits might ERP have for this business? What are the advantages of ERP systems? How might ERP systems increase the value of a business? Okay, basically asking the same question in a couple of different ways. Okay. In terms of the challenges then, now the way that Loudon and Loudon actually present this, in Chapter 9, Loudon and Loudon talk about ERP systems, SCM systems and CRM systems, and then at the end they present a section that talks about the challenges for all enterprise applications. So these challenges here relate to ERP systems, but also have read across for supply chain management in some cases, and for CRM as well. Okay, so some of the challenges that kind of go across all of those. These are massive systems, okay, so there is software involved in these. There will be a need for infrastructure involved in these as well, in terms of being able to store the data that you need, okay, so you might have hardware implications, software implications of this whole system, okay, and those things are highly expensive to purchase, okay. I always caveat slightly whenever we talk about purchasing and we're talking about systems, because of course you can't go out and buy an ERP system for an organisation. You can buy software, you can buy infrastructure, but particularly with software, it usually needs to be customised, particularly for something like an ERP, because an ERP should be fitted to the operations of your business, not vice versa. Okay, so you don't want to buy an ERP that is set up for, a generic type of business that doesn't map to what your business looks like and what your processes look like. Okay, so there are some aspects of this that can be purchased. They are usually expensive to purchase and they require a great deal of customization. But just be careful about this idea. Sometimes people get this idea that you can buy an ERP system. You can't. Okay, expensive to purchase and to implement, okay, because there is an awful lot to be done here in terms of customizing this, identifying what your processes are, identifying what you need, training your staff to use a new system, etc. Okay, so there's a lot in the implementation of these types of systems. There are technology changes, okay, and sometimes there are certain people and certain businesses where that goes easier than others, okay. There are also fundamentally usually business process changes, okay, particularly with ERPs, particularly with CRMs as well, okay. Quite often you're fundamentally making changes to how people do their job, how information gets into the system, okay, and that obviously needs to be very carefully managed. And there's a separate section, and it's one of the important topic areas where we talk about implementation and information systems. So I'll just flag that up to you. You'll see that actually that comes up in a few of the past paper questions that we're going to talk about today. So I'm not going to cover it in this session, but it's there for you. What's important is that organisational learning takes place as a result of the implementation of this change. Okay, so we find out more about what's important to our business, what's important to our business in terms of achieving our strategy, okay, and how, if there is any change that occurs to the ERP as a result of that, or indeed if there's change to the business processes that happens as a result of that. Be aware that particularly where you're basing something on a particular software, okay, so for ERPs you might be talking about SAP or Oracle have maybe built the underlying ERP software that you've purchased. Be aware that given the huge amount of cost and commitment involved in implementation, making it appropriate for your business and all of that sort of thing, that effectively ties you to that software vendor for a fairly significant period of time, because you won't want to change your vendor and then have to go through that whole process again 2 years later, okay? You just wouldn't want to do that, because it's probably taken you 2 years to implement it in the first place, okay? So you do have switching costs associated with the software. You'd also want to make sure that, because you're committed effectively to that provider, are they reliable? Are they reliable on an ongoing basis? You'd want to get information from people who have worked with that vendor before. You know, is the support there? Are there updates and upgrades available when it's needed? And so on. You also want to make sure that you've got the resource within your business, so that whenever there is an update or an upgrade, that you can actually make the changes that you need to make, because you will have already customized that software. And the other thing that's key here as well is also this idea of data standardization, data management and data cleansing, particularly if you're bringing things together from different systems, if you have maybe bought over different companies, if you have historically had standalone systems in each of those different functions. It's very likely that the data that's contained within those systems is not in exactly the right format, or needs to be cleansed because maybe there are obsolete records and things like that. So it's likely that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of taking the data that's in the processes as they stand and bringing those into whatever that new system is. Okay, because remember, it's not just like you start an ERP and you start from, okay, we're implementing it on the 1st of March and we have no back history. You've got to have all of that back history in terms of your customer accounts, in terms of your budget figures, your figures year to date, all of those sorts of things that all have to come into the system to be the back history of your system effectively. Okay, so you don't just start on day one with, oh, new data. The existing data has to be brought in, and sometimes that could be a really significant piece of work. Okay. So look, how does this turn up in past questions? Okay, well, from the April 17 paper, question 5, so just to remind you, that's one of the section B questions. It's an optional question. There are 20 marks for the question, okay? We're not going to look at all of these parts. I'm just going to flag up the ones that I think are most relevant today, but I would suggest to you, maybe after the session, go back and have a look at the parts that we're not looking at. So the first part, part A, asks you to outline the 4 main types of organisational change that is enabled by information technology, giving examples relevant to the implementation of ERP systems. Okay? Now, we're not going to look at that solution in class today because we haven't gone through the types of organisational change. What I would just flag to you is the importance of being able to, first of all, know what the main types of organisational change might be. And second of all, to say, well, okay, how might these relate to implementation of ERP systems? So you need to know 2 things. You need to know both about the types of organisational change, and you need to have a good working knowledge of ERP to be able to say, well, okay, which of those might be relevant? Okay. Can I tell you that that's quite often what trips people up in terms of the detail? Somebody who maybe goes into the exam has a kind of very basic definition of what an ERP is, doesn't really understand it, can kind of like parrot me back a few lines from Loudon and Loudon, doesn't really understand what an ERP system is. So whenever they get a question like that and they have to apply it and think, well, what does this mean for organisational change? That's where they struggle to give me an answer. Okay, so that is something that I would have seen in the past. The question that we're going to look at is the middle one. Again, it's 8 marks to discuss the potential benefits and challenges of implementing an ERP system in a large growing manufacturing organisation. Okay, so again, I'm not just looking for, I'm always trying to make sure that you can't just dump everything you've ever heard about ERP systems. I want you to kind of try to make it relevant for me for a large growing manufacturing organisation. So when you try to give examples, when you say, oh, we want to, this might be a benefit, you're giving examples that are relevant to that particular type of organisation. You're not giving me examples about a hotel chain or about a retailer that you've read in Loudon and Loudon, okay? And then the last bit at the bottom there, just briefly outline the systems analysis and design activities the organisation should undertake before purchasing the ERP software. And that just links into one of the important topics. That's your 1/3 about important topics. And it links into the systems development and life cycle kind of type processes later on. Okay, I also want to flag for you that this comes up in the case study example, which is what we're going to look at the end of this session. Okay, so just coming back to the question there that's there in terms of, in the italics, okay, potential benefits and challenges, okay. What are we doing here? Well, really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, well, okay, what are the benefits and challenges, and making sure that they're relevant, okay. So look, you've got these on your slides. Let me just pick up a few of these just to give you a flavour of the sort of thing that I'm expecting. So you saw increased operational efficiency was one of the things that we mentioned on the previous slide where we talked about benefits. Be very careful about, and again, this is something that I do see in exams, people have these kind of bullet lists in their head and they go into the exam and they drop down increased operational efficiency. And that's it, okay? It's very hard for me to give credit for that, okay? Because you really haven't shown me that you actually understand what that means. So make sure that whenever you're giving something like this, you say something like, okay, increased operational efficiency. In what way? How? Okay, well, by providing managers across the business processes with timely, accurate and relevant information to aid their decision making. That's something that's really important in a growing business, okay, because you're probably going to have, sorry, just a second.
No, go on, it's technology, it switches on.
Would it be just too ironic if we had technology problems in the information systems
We already
session?
do, but I'm not going to tell you about it.
Worries me massively. Do you want me to stop or do you want me to keep going?
Keep going.
Are you sure? Okay. Okay, so we're thinking about what's important in a growing business. Thinking about things like responding more quickly to customer requests, thinking about generating better, the one at the bottom there, thinking about generating more accurate sales and production forecasts. That's really important also in a growing business, particularly if things are changing very quickly within the business, to get that information to managers so that they can make better forecasts, make better decisions, and also to reduce risks of things like overtrading, risks of stock outs, things like that, okay? I'm just trying to think of which are the most important things just to flag up to you here. So better information on the processes, which will change as the business grows, giving better linkages between these different functional areas to give better decisions for the firm. Should they make or buy their products? Maybe they're thinking about outsourcing. Maybe they're thinking about how much stock should they hold. Should we go to a just-in-time manufacturing philosophy? Should we hold, sort of a month's worth of stock in stock to make sure we've got a huge, be a huge buffer stock there? Those are the sorts of pieces of information that management might need. Those sorts of decisions, if you think about it, okay, you might think about, okay, inventory and, the level of stock that's held, that's maybe a production and manufacturing decision. But actually it has huge knock-on implications for the finance department, because at the end of the day, what are you doing? You're tying up your working capital by doing that. So you need that overview of what's happening in those different production processes to do that. You'll also need information coming from your sales and your marketing team to understand, well, what are our expected sales? If we're saying we should have a month's worth of stock, what does that look like for the month of July? Is that different to the month of December, as everybody's going mad outside with Black Friday and Christmas shopping? Okay, so that sort of information is coming through. So it's giving you that, or giving managers that overview of information to make decisions in the different functional areas, but using information from a variety of those functional areas. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Just to look at a few of the challenges quickly as well. Okay. ERP implementation, okay, has fundamental effects on how a business operates. Is this the right thing to be doing for this business at this time? Okay, you've got a growing organisation. Is spending the time on the ERP the right thing to commit to? Okay, because it has fundamental effects on business processes. Maybe your business processes are not set at this point in time. Okay, so that's a really important thing to think about, and you'll see it colours a lot of the challenges that we talked to here. Okay, the implementation is time-consuming and costly. Is this where the business should be focusing at the moment? Staff buy-in is crucial. Can we actually do the appropriate amount of consultation, the appropriate amount of training at this time if we're a growing business? We don't know about the size and expertise of the IT function. And remember, this is not a case study. This is just a little few lines of a question. What you've seen on the screen is what the people sitting the exam saw. So we don't have any information about, how much IT expertise they have. In the exam, it's entirely fair for you to say, we don't know how much IT expertise is there. So it may well be that it's not there. And that's an entirely valid point. Okay, so do they have the expertise to be able to do the customization, et cetera, that would be needed to give you an ERP system that functions and that does that delivers business value for this business? Then the point again about costly support. Can the organisation commit to these costs now and in the future? Okay, or is there a risk that this might change? Okay, so in terms of my marking scheme, okay, so the marking scheme for information systems looks very different to the marking scheme for management accounting and financial accounting, etc., where you've got all these little, half marks for this and that and the other thing. So obviously information systems is pretty different. You will always see in the questions that I ask, what I always do is I will always set out at the bottom how I'm marking it. So for this particular question, this was an 8-mark question. I hadn't specified how many benefits or challenges that I wanted. Roughly, I was working to the basis of 8 times 1 mark for suggesting and briefly outlining the challenges or benefits. Okay, so it wasn't enough to say increased operational efficiency, but a line or two explaining what you meant by operational efficiency would have got you the 1 mark. Now, do I, as your examiner, have a bit of flexibility in terms of that marking scheme? Absolutely, I do. So if you wrote me 4 really good points in really good detail, would I be comfortable giving you 1.5 marks or 2 marks for that, a much more significant point in a lot more detail? Absolutely, I can do that. Okay, so the marking scheme will give you a guide, but as your examiner, I have a lot of flexibility. Okay, and that's what I mean when I say I think it's a really good advantage to you that you have an examiner who also marks your scripts. Okay, because I have that leeway where if somebody else was marking that script, they probably wouldn't. Okay, be aware that in other questions that you'll see, I will maybe have said, okay, give me 4 of something for 8 marks, and then it's much clearer that you need to give me 4 and there'll be 2 marks for each. Okay. One of the points I'm going to make it now, because I'm conscious later on we talk a little bit about exam technique. I'm very wary of bullet points in an exam. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, and the reason why I'm saying this is because I've got a PowerPoint with bullets on it. Okay, the reason why I'm slightly wary of bullet points is I think it tends to lead you to give too little detail. Okay, now in honesty, in that question, it doesn't matter too much. It's probably in order to get 1 mark, you're probably talking about a sentence or 2 sentences, not very much at all. But if you're looking for something where maybe more often than not, I'm looking for something that has maybe a small paragraph. And if you start to do things in bullets, it tends to tie you to a line or 2 lines, because that's what bullets do, okay? And you may well find that you're not giving enough detail, okay? So I sort of wanted to give that a wee bit of a health warning, and I'll mention that again later. The same point goes for tables, okay? Because I don't know about you guys, but I know I'm very sort of orderly when I'm looking at things that are maybe an advantage and a disadvantage, and you have these things in your notes. Be careful of tables, because they have the same effect sometimes as bullets, because they tend to give you tend to give less detail. So just be aware of that. Similarly with diagrams where those are relevant, okay? Can be very helpful in terms of helping you to organize your thoughts, but just make sure you're given enough detail. That question's okay, there's not too much detail to give. Okay. That's all I want to say about ERP. Anybody any specific questions about ERP they want to ask? Go ahead.
Yeah, and just in terms of the actual systems themselves, like is it one software package that takes data in from other packages within the company? How do you actually present themselves? How does an ERP? It
depends on the organisation. In honesty, sorry, I would love that there was it's one of those things that there's not one answer for that. What would be common enough would be that you would have an ERP that would pull information from different types of software in the different parts of the organisation. So if you go back to the fundamental of what the ERP is really about that common database in the centre that pulls that information in. So it's absolutely possible that you would have different software types. Perhaps, for example, a piece of what we call legacy software. So something, so let's say you've always used Sage Payroll, okay, would be a really common example. Or you've always used a particular HR system or a particular piece of accounting software. The ERP would be about the centralised database and where that comes from. So that might be your SAP or your Oracle, but it may integrate together with other pieces of software and other modules. But the key thing is that the information is coming in from those processes that relate. Does that make sense?
does,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The CRM and all of those, are they under the ERP umbrella? Are they part of the ERP, or they are ERP themselves?
The way that Loudon & Loudon describes them is Loudon & Loudon describes them as enterprise application systems, okay, as opposed to ERP systems. Okay, so he draws a distinction between, so a CRM is not an ERP. An SCM is not an ERP, but all ERP, SCM and CRM are what they refer to as enterprise applications. Isn't that really bloody helpful? Okay, thank you for asking that question, because I'll be honest with you, I don't think that, I even think when you sit down with a textbook, that's not especially clear. I think it's the fact that you've got that word enterprise there again, okay? So an ERP, an SCM and a CRM are all examples of enterprise applications, but they're not examples of ERPs. Okay? Yeah, hi?
Just following on a question of the ERP, is that almost like a data warehouse would be an ERP, or would it be an application sitting on a data warehouse, or are they completely?
Okay, sorry, I've just remembered that I should have been repeating the questions as well. So that question was saying, is a data warehouse an ERP? We're actually going to talk about data warehouses in the next section. Okay, the distinction that I would draw at this stage is that a data warehouse, in terms of the definition that's used in Loudon and Loudon, the data warehouse would usually take the information that might be contained within an ERP, but it would be the historical data, as opposed to the operational day-to-day transaction data that would be used within the database that's central to the ERP. Okay, but thank you, that's a nice question. You'll see that when we come back to it later on. Can I just clarify that the previous question was, is an SCM and a CRM an example of an ERP? And that was the answer. The answer to that is that they are all enterprise applications, but that SCMs and CRMs are not ERPs, but they are enterprise applications. Sorry, realised I should have backtracked on myself. Okay, any other questions about ERPs? Application? Go ahead.
Do you mean that an ERP is really some of the applications? Can you give us an example of an actual ERP? Like you said SAP.
Well, SAP and Oracle, yeah. But be very careful about that, because SAP and Oracle are your softwares. Okay, your ERP is actually not just about the software, it's about the whole system. So when we talk about a system, I think there's maybe a point that's maybe worth making if you haven't really engaged with this topic as yet. It's a point that's worth making is that a system is always more than its software. Okay, so a system is not just the software, it's also the infrastructure, the hardware, the ability, the infrastructure that helps you to store your data. It will also include, usually when we talk about a system, we usually are talking about the processes, the things that have to be done in order to get the data into the system, in order for things to be done with the data, and for that data to be communicated back out again, or well, it's usually information. We talk about communicating back out information as opposed to data, okay? So that's important. It's important to clarify that when we talk about an ERP, we might be talking about ERP software, and yes, that's sold by people like SAP, Oracle, other vendors are available. But when we talk about an ERP, we need to be careful that we're usually talking about an ERP system when we're applying it to an organisation, and that's more than just the software that you can buy. It's the system that you develop that matches to your organisation. Okay, does that answer your question okay?
Yeah, it does actually. The point there is it's the system you develop to match your organisation.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, let's go, and then we're going to talk about CRM. I have left SCMs out, not because they're not important, just because I want to do the April 17 case study and it deals with CRM, okay? So please do not read anything into the fact that SCM has been left out of this particular session. Okay, so CRM systems, as we've mentioned already, are an enterprise application. The idea behind this system is that they will capture and integrate data, customer data from all over the organization. They consolidate it. They give you an opportunity to analyze it. And the idea is that this information that is held centrally can then be distributed to the various systems and what are referred to as customer touch points throughout the enterprise. Okay? When we talk about customer touch points, we're talking about any of the points at which the customer engages with the organization. So thinking about something like, I'm going to use the example of a phone retailer. Okay, so your O2s or your Vodafones or whatever's. Basically, when we talk about customer touch points, the customer touch points for those sorts of providers might be in stores, it might be through the phone, it might be online. So anywhere that the customer interacts with the retailer, okay, that would be considered our customer touch point. So the idea behind a CRM is that the information on each of us as customers is stored centrally, and when we engage with the retailer or the provider, that the person on the other end or the system on the other end knows all that it needs to know about our purchase history, our billing history, have we paid our bill, what's our data usage, what's this, what's that, and that's all available to the person or the system that is interacting with us. Okay, that's the idea behind customer touch points. Okay. So the idea is that you get this single enterprise view of customers, okay? So when I call up, God, I'm trying to think, who am I on these days? I think I'm on Vodafone these days. When I call up Vodafone, okay, whether I walk into a shop or whether I have a look online at my bill or whatever I try to do, if I put something into the online system about upgrading or something like that, Vodafone knows who Danielle McConville is. It knows, you know, all about my data usage. It knows all about this, that, and the other thing. And that information is there whether I'm interacting online, whether I'm talking to somebody on the phone, whether I walk into a shop, whatever I do. Okay? So that's the fundamental behind CRM systems. Okay? Again, okay, what we have here is there are a range of different applications that are used by these CRM systems to address all of the different aspects of the customer relationship. Okay, so some aspects of the CRM deal with things like sales. Okay, so the sales to you and I, so telephone sales, web sales, any sort of sale, okay, to us, whether that's an ongoing purchase or whatever it is. There's then a separate aspect that might deal with service. Okay, so you've got an existing customer, okay, and you're servicing that customer through call centres. Maybe it's something to do with warranty claims. Maybe it's something to do with providing them with advice on something. Maybe the fundamental of your product offering is that you offer a service on an ongoing basis. That service could be remembered through a variety of channels now. Okay. One of the aspects that we will that's dealt with in the Loudon textbook, okay, I'm not going to particularly go into it today, is about aspects of social CRM, okay, which is used both for service but also for marketing as well. So it's the use of social media either from a service perspective, and you guys will see this. If you want to get something done, post it on Twitter, okay. I had great crack with it. I had not too long ago, okay. Emailed, phoned, you name it. Put it on my Twitter feed, put it on their Facebook, and they got back to me very quickly. Okay, so there are all sorts of ways that we can engage through social media from a service perspective, but also if we do engage, okay, or perhaps even sometimes if we don't, that social media can also become part of the data that's used for marketing as well. Okay, and I think we're all becoming increasingly aware of how often that actually becomes the case. Okay, that information that is available on us through social media is actually being used for marketing purposes as well. Okay, so the marketing aspect of CRM. Okay, there are CRMs, aspects of the CRM that may be used for marketing particular products to particular individuals. Could be through data analysis of information that they hold on the customers already. Could be through analysis of other information such as, for example, Facebook feeds and things like that. Okay. Perhaps a more useful way to think about CRMs is that there maybe are these operational and analytical aspects to it. Okay. So for operational CRM, these are your customer-facing applications, such as things like Salesforce automation, call centers, customer service support, and marketing automation. Okay, so the things that happen to enable the operations of the organization to happen on an ongoing basis, the day-to-day transactions that happen, the day-to-day interactions with the customers. And behind that, we have this analytical CRM, which takes the data that we have on the customers and it analyzes that. Okay, so it's stored through things like data warehouses, and again, we're going to come back to that later on. Oh, sorry, we're not going to come back to that now. We're going to come back to that in the webinar. Sorry, the data warehouses we're going to come back to in the webinar, and similarly, the aspects such as OLAP and data mining, the analysis, again, is going to be covered in the webinar as well. Okay, so you've got CRMs doing slightly different things here. Okay, your CRM may include purchase software or cloud-based software. Okay, so to come back to the point that we made earlier on, when we talked about CRM, okay, there is CRM software that you can buy. Salesforce is one, okay, other vendors are available. You buy the software, but crucially, when you're thinking about how this implements in an organization, you've got to think not just about the software, because the software is not a system in itself. Okay, you've also got to think about what's the data that's going in there, what's the business processes that get that data in there, who are the people and the job descriptions that get that data into that system. Okay, that's absolutely critical. And similarly, how does that data come back out again? To whom is that information communicated? How is it communicated? How is it used? Okay, so the software is part of that, but it's not the full system. Okay, I'm just thinking back to the point you made earlier. It's fair to say that increasingly that software is provided not as something that is loaded onto a particular computer or a particular server, but it's accessed through the cloud. Okay, so now I'm not going to talk about cloud computing today. broadly speaking, because actually I find students tend to be fairly happy with cloud computing. It certainly seems to be something that's well answered in the exam, so I didn't want to particularly focus on it today. It's there, go and have a look at it. Have a look at what the technology is, the risks of it, the implications of it, what the benefits are. Okay, and you'll see that it comes up in questions where we talk about, for example, the specific benefits of CRM or SCM in a cloud-based environment. I think the August 17 case study had a question on SCM, what the specific benefits of SCM on a cloud basis would be. Okay, so the sort of information that's managed is information about the customer profile. Okay, so things like, for example, are you a repeat purchaser, or do you tend to purchase on a one-off basis? What value of goods do you buy? What deals or offers do you tend to take advantage of? So if it's banks are really, really good at this, credit card companies are really good at this, at understanding, well, are you the sort of person who takes a balance transfer offer and then never spends on the card? Okay, so it's information like that. What type of customer are you? It will include transaction activity information as well. Okay, so things like what have you bought, what have your queries been, what are your payments on your account like? Do you pay promptly, do you pay on time, do you pay the minimum amount, okay, or do you pay your balance in full? The market segmentation information as well. So where do you sit within the kind of broader scope of who the customers are? And it could be segmentation by age, gender, people with dependents, people without dependents, and so on. And then customer response and behaviour prediction. Okay, so using information like the customer profiling information, predicting how you will behave if they send you, for example, a particular offer. Okay, so are you likely to respond favourably to an offer because it's Black Friday and it's 25% off everything? Or are you perhaps going to respond when it's a balance transfer offer, if it's your credit card company, and so on? Okay, so it's information like that that's included there. In terms of the business value, okay, part of this is about increasing customer satisfaction, okay? You know yourself, there's nothing more frustrating than having to repeatedly contact an organisation, give the same information again and again and again, contact an organisation and you speak to somebody who has no idea who you are, what's happening on your account, will have to get back to you, and then they never do. Okay, so a lot of this is about increasing customer satisfaction. So whenever the customer engages with the organisation, they get a fast service, they get a service that's appropriate to them from an operational point of view, but also that they get marketing, advertising and things like that that's relevant to them. They don't get bombarded with lots of stuff that's not relevant to them, so that they unsubscribe from emails, for example. Potentially can reduce direct marketing costs because you can target more. Potential for more effective marketing because you've got better information about who these people are and what they buy. Okay, particularly where you have, these organisations that have, particularly retailers. It must be because it's Black Friday, I've got retailers on the brain. But you know yourself, you've got these kind of huge retail organisations that you might buy something from. I personally tend to spend far too much money on mother care right now. Okay, I've got an 8-week-old newborn, so most of my salary appears to go into mother care at this point in time. Okay, and you could just see that as soon as Black Friday came along, then the next thing was, oh, early learning centre. It's like, that's the same company. There we go. Didn't know that. And you just know that then the next thing is going to be, I don't know what the next thing is. Yeah, Marks and Spencer's, yes, wine. Wine, yeah, cases of wine. But yeah, so it's this idea that you have this sort of more effective marketing. Lower costs of customer acquisition and retention. It's a lot cheaper to retain a customer than to acquire a new customer. Giving them good service, knowing what they want, targeting them, okay, have hopefully had a good previous experience with you, is a very low cost way of doing your marketing, and hopefully it increases your sales revenue. Okay, so in terms of past paper questions, okay, this is August 17 again, this is question 5, it's one of the optional questions. This really tripped people up, and I was really surprised by it because SCM and CRM questions tend to be very popular with students, okay? The first part was, there's a very simple, very, very common way that I ask a question. There's 4 marks up front, explain the term X, okay? Describe the potentially different elements and functions of CRM systems an organisation might use. All I was looking for there was your definition of what's a CRM system. it did not need to be Loudon's definition, okay? It just needed to be a good working definition of what a CRM is trying to do. It probably used phrases like the idea of customer touch points, making sure that the information is available wherever the customer engages with the organisation, okay? In terms of elements and functions, all that was about was it was either about, depending on which way you chose to answer the question, fine if you wanted to talk about operational versus analytical CRM, fine if you wanted to talk about that in terms of it might include sales, service and marketing aspects, okay? So whatever way you wanted to talk about that, just giving me that wee bit more detail. Not huge detail, 4 marks, okay? One of the things we'll talk about a wee bit later on, we'll talk about general prep, is this idea of marks per minute. No, sorry, minutes per mark, okay? So how many minutes do you want to spend per mark, okay? Broadly speaking, you've got a 3-hour exam, 180 minutes, 100 marks in the exam. Okay, so 1.8 minutes per mark. So about 8 minutes worth of writing there. Well, probably 6 or 7 minutes worth of writing and a minute's thinking time. All right. So that's the sort of, use that as a kind of a yardstick of, okay, how much detail is expected here. Of course, use the past paper questions as well as a yardstick of that. Okay. Broadly speaking, I find students' answers tend to be too brief. Okay. And I'm not of the opinion that it's a time-pressured exam. Okay, that has not been the feedback, that it's a super time-pressured exam. I know you will have time-pressured exams. I don't think this is one of them. Okay. The question we're going to look at is the middle one there, just benefits and challenges. Again, I'm just going to flag a few of these up for you and how they're answered. And then the last one, our specific context here was professional services firms. And the reason why I picked up on that was this idea, really, I just wanted people to think about a client as opposed to a retailer, okay? Because all of the examples that you look at it for CRM tend to be about retailers. And CRM systems are actually used in a huge range of different organisations. I do a lot of work with charities. I was even talking to a charity recently that has a version of a CRM system for their customers, their service users, okay? Now, it depends on the type of charity you have, obviously. But I thought that was really, really interesting. It just shows you the types of organisations that are actually identifying a client or a customer and thinking, well, this is worth our while having this information available for our staff, having a good quality relationship, having that data available for the client so that there's one touch point, etc. And then the last bit was actually leading into a topic that is important in terms of the development of systems, okay? So let's just very quick, well, flag up as well, we're going to look at this in the case study question after the break. I'm going to just quickly look at the solution, okay? All I want to do here, again, I'm going to provide this for you. We're not going to go through all of the slides, funnily enough, because we'll be here till, you know, Saturday morning, and nobody wants that. Just to flag up, have a look at these, okay? And in particular, have a look at how we've taken the suggested benefits of CRM and just made it relevant to the case, okay? So we're talking about data on client interaction here as opposed to a customer, okay? We're just talking about improved response time to client queries, okay? Very same point, we're just changing the terminology a wee bit. In particular, we're talking about reduced client churn or improved loyalty, greater efficiency in terms of service, identifying profitable and high lifetime value clients, okay, as opposed to customers. So it's not just about, this is not about the production of the purchase of goods. This is about kind of providing an ongoing service, okay? So the terminology that we use is just that little bit different. But some of the key points can be made. You want to retain your clients the same way you'd want to retain your customers if you were a retailer, okay? An ability to respond to opportunities to deliver additional services to clients, okay? So when we think about products, we're quite often thinking about direct marketing new products to existing customers. Here we're thinking about, well, what are the other services that we can offer to these clients, okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Would you expect a particular example of professional services, or would you just,
No.
professional services in general?
I deliberately left it vague, okay, because absolutely. Absolutely, and to be fair for the people who are sitting in the room and actually work in an accounting firm, you will probably naturally think about your firm. Yeah, so it could be an accounting firm, a professional services firm covers a really wide variety of things. It's the idea that you have a client that you provide a professional service to. So it actually is not necessarily an accounting practice. It could be a law firm, it could be estate agents, it could be all sorts of different professional services, consulting services, advisory services, you name it, okay? Okay, and remember as well, I was not expecting, specific knowledge of that type of firm. Like anything, it helps if you've seen one. okay? But it's not expected, okay? In terms of challenges, I sort of laugh thinking about this, thinking about some of the dinosaurs that I would have worked with in practice back in the days. Think about telling your partner, okay, if you work in a professional services firm, or think about telling your finance director if you work in a particular organisation, that every time they talk to that client, they're going to have to record it on a piece of software. Okay, and you'll understand very quickly why you have to think very carefully about the fact that this involves fundamental changes in how people work. Okay, because actually it's not good enough for somebody to be carrying that knowledge in their head. This is the idea that you put that information on the system. When you have a phone call with the client, when you have a meeting with the client, there is information on the system about this. What happened? What was the outcome? What have we got to do in relation to this? Okay, that's a very different way of working for a lot of people, particularly at the sort of more senior levels quite often. Okay, so there's requirement for fundamental changes in the way businesses operate, can lead to resistance. These are complex pieces of software that need to be carefully implemented to make sure that they are appropriate for the business as well, okay? Because you don't want to you don't want to buy this, you know, the best piece of CRM software in the world that ties all of your staff to spending loads of time recording things. You know, maybe it's very slow to record things. The firm that I'm married to an accountant as well, the firm that happens. The firm that my husband used to work for, they used to have a system, and this is sort of 12, 15 years ago, where whenever you lifted the phone to your client, it automatically started recording and charging time to that client. That's 12, 15 years ago, you know. So, you know, that's that's an example of how it's very easy to record time. So then all he had to do was sort of say, you know, well, what were they talking about? And there it was on the system, okay? As opposed to, for example, having to log into something and create this and do this and type this, you know. So there are ways to make this there are ways to make this easier and there are ways to make this harder, okay? So thinking about what's appropriate. These are complex. There are specific software packages for professional firms that are available, okay? So you can buy specific pieces of software that are tailored towards professional service firms, architects firms, you know, advisory firms, you name it, okay? You can usually buy tailored software, but most will require some sort of level of customization for how your specific organisation works. And you're seeing some of the points that we talked about in terms of the general challenges of enterprise applications, becoming dependent on the provider to upgrade and maintain the software, switching costs. You need a very clear idea of how this information is going to be used. There is no point changing business processes, winding everybody up, okay, to gather a lot of data that's not then used. Okay, so we've got to think really carefully about how we're going to use the data once it's there. What is the purpose of this? Why are we doing this? So if you're in a very, very small, you know, sort of one partner practice with a few managers and you have a few individual staff, maybe 10 people in the organisation, do you need to spend a lot of money on software and systems to make sure that you understand what's happening in your client base? Probably not. Okay. Whereas if you're if you're a much bigger organisation, yeah, you absolutely need to see this. If you're a big organisation that changes teams very regularly, and you've maybe somebody who works on a client this year and doesn't work on the client next year, and so on and so forth, it's really important to save that information. Okay. So look, 5 marks each for benefits and challenges. Again, I hadn't specifically said give me 2 of each. Okay. So there was flexibility there. So I was kind of working on the basis of 5 times 1 mark for each. If you give me more benefits and challenges, if you give me 6 and 4 or 7 and 3, I've got flexibility there. If you're making valid points, I'm happy to give them the marks, okay? But just making sure that they're relevant to the content, okay? So if you started to tell me that it would help you to, with your production, you know, that this could help with production planning, okay? You're not going to get a mark for that. It's not relevant to the context, okay? Okay, any questions on CRM or on that particular question? Okay, should we think about a cup of coffee? Yeah, let's have a quick cup of coffee. We do a quick 5 minutes. Okay, folks, if you have any questions, you didn't want to shout there.